to Season 6, Episode 5 of The People's Project. Lots of fun things to discuss today, and joining me on the panel is Anthony Curcio, who is a LDP candidate for Northwestern Melbourne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you here. And Sam Eddy, someone who I think was a bit of a crowd favourite because you're one of the only people to come on Discernible and say, okay, everyone, relax, let's do some wussas.
Well, look, it's good to be back, and I'm glad it resonated, at least with some people.
I was actually quite surprised when you were keen to come on this show because some of the stuff we discuss can be quite triggering and like, it's wrong, it's bad. And so I thought, this is interesting to have a calming influence on the show.
Well, I get triggered like everyone else, so I always try and take a step back, but I don't know if I'll be able to with all these topics, but we'll see. Let's see what happens.
The reason why we might get a bit stressed today is we need to talk about 5 things, everyone. So first of all, the fact that all of the Eastern Seaboard is under pressure to turn off their dishwashers at night because we're going to have no electricity in Australia. That's insane. We're going to talk about the increase to the minimum wage, which has been announced this week. How is that helping with inflation? Mass formation psychosis, which we should all be familiar with now, but a possible explanation for the moment that we're living in. PR Guy 17, why I stand with him. That's right, I'm about to get some hate. And finally, the Chinese protest, the COVID app. Incredible news out of China. That's probably the most important segment. I'm going to tell you about facial recognition in Kmart and Bunnings and the good guys. Stick around for that. All right, let's go.
The Federal Energy Minister is urging Sydney residents to limit power use tonight, warning the New South Wales grid is under significant pressure. The crunch time from now until 8 p.m, with the risk of what's called load shedding, in other words, rolling blackouts.
Another vividly cold night where these lights were allowed, low-energy LEDs, but conservation was urged elsewhere. Australia's largest aluminium smelter in the Hunter was forced to cut production. Transport for New South Wales advised staff to work from home, and even hospitals were asked to save energy. New South Wales has at least 70 generators, the most powerful, all coal-fired, but Liddell closes next year. Eraring, our biggest, in 2 years. Bayswater's closure has been brought forward to 2033 at the latest. And today, BHP announced it will close our largest coal mine near Muswellbrook in 2030 because it simply cannot find a buyer.
A future powered by cleaner, cheaper energy. A future in which we make more things here.
We can store the renewable energy if we have the investment. And that is investment that has been lacking for the last decade. That's the problem.
Wow. So, blackouts. Turn your dishwashers off.
Yes.
Welcome to Sydney.
Interesting.
Are you as surprised as I am that this is happening?
Look, to be honest with you, we saw how they were talking to the fact that this is a problem that has been more than a decade or a decade long. I think it's actually probably been closer to 20 years, to be perfectly honest with you.
You're not a fan of the national energy market?
No. Look, I'm all for renewable energies and things like that. I support clients who, import and then export solar panels and, converters and the likes of. But it's not baseload power, is it?
Yeah, good point. This morning I saw in Victoria, Richard Reardon, a fan of this show, he posted most of our power in a cold Victorian morning was coming from coal, gas, a little bit of hydro, but certainly no wind and solar. So that is a problem, baseload power. But you can't talk about nuclear. That's not allowed. I might give everyone a quick lesson on what this power crisis is. Okay, so we have something called the National Electricity Market, which is currently dead. The national, what are they called? The Australian Energy Market Operator suspended the market. So what happens normally, right, is wholesale prices of electricity fluctuate anywhere from $100 a megawatt hour up to about 15,100 megawatt hour. And it fluctuates every 5 minutes, we can see this. And so when you pay your retailer, Energy Australia or Origin Energy or whoever it is, for a plan, they're charging you a risk fee. Basically, they're going to buy the power as they can and they're going to sell it to you for a set rate in your contract. And so that's how your electricity prices work. But what's happened here is that the price has gone so high that the AEMO stepped in and said, you know what, screw the market. We're going back to $300 a megawatt hour, which is good for us, right? Except sometimes it costs more than that to make power. Sometimes it costs a gas operator $400 a megawatt hour to break even. So when they come in and they say 300 is the max, the gas operators shut down.
Yeah, it's
Why
crazy.
would I open my plant to lose money?
Well, I'm a reamped energy customer.
Me too.
And I got
The email?
I got the email in the mail from the CEO or whoever it was saying that, telling me to leave. And I thought, is this a joke?
Is it a stunt?
Yeah, exactly. And so I was trying to understand exactly what this is all about. I mean, the clip we just watched, it's very high level. You started to give a more of an in-depth analysis on exactly what's going on, because there's lots of issues. There's, what does everyone wants to keep their power on. Everyone wants to be able to use their dishwasher, presumably. So you've got the short-term need. You've got renewables. So there's Labor saying that we haven't invested. I don't know enough about that. Perhaps we haven't. What does base load power really mean? What about batteries? I'm talking as a layman, why can't we have massive batteries
We have one in
to
South
store renewables? And then, but what about nuclear? Is it just that it's nuclear we can't talk about because it's politically, it's on the nose, or we're just too scared of, fallout if there's an issue with some sort of nuclear power plant?
It's funny,
So it's kind of compounding all these.
It's not on the nose anymore.
It's not.
Because, we've grown up, we're similar ages, I guess, and
A bit older, but yeah.
we've grown up hearing about nuclear, the Australian context of nuclear, thinking that it was kind of majority don't really want it, I've noticed. But now if you look at the polls, it's over 50%, I think it's low 50s, wanting to have the discussion on nuclear, or wanting to have it as base load. That's very big change.
Yeah, right. I didn't realise that.
Yeah, I was surprised too, it's like 54% or something. Very shocked. Well, the thing about these power generators, when they shut down the gas because it's too expensive to operate, the AEMO actually has stepped in and said, you must open your plant. They actually have the legal authority to say, no, switch on that gas plant.
Yep.
It's literally a centralised control structure. Then they say, we will compensate you for any losses that you make.
Who's paying for that compensation?
So this is where we find ourselves today. We find AEMO taking over the market, saying you must turn on your power plant even if it loses money and we'll pay. It's just disastrous. How did we get here? Well, from the best I can tell is there was, people are saying there was a bit of weather, but we have that every year. But there was a bit of supply constraints. I know everyone likes to blame Ukraine and Russia for everything, but there was a little bit of constraints there. But also, there was a lot of aging coal power plants which we have underinvested in because we're all moving to renewables, right, apparently. So a lot of our power plants were offline. We had about 25% of our coal capacity on the East Coast offline at the time of this event. And so there just wasn't enough power. So the question is, do we need to spend more money on coal plants, or do we do what Labor says, which is don't worry about the coal plants, let's shut them down like we saw in that video, and let's invest in base load renewables?
Well, I'm sort of agnostic to the technology. Like, I don't mind what the technology is, just as long as it's spelled out in terms of, well, this is the short-term plan, this is the medium-term plan, and this is where we're heading in the long term. So it might mean a short-term solution is to maintain the plants that we have, that we know work, while we're building capacity in renewables, or even consider something like nuclear technology. It can't just be a short-term solution.
That's true. But it is worrying that we don't really have anything. Like if you look at the ratio of coal generation, which is our base load, to gas is quick, gas peaker plants, and expensive, and worse for, I don't know if it's worse than right. Anyway, it's more expensive, and we've shifted our proportion of coal, gas, and then renewables. Now it's like quite a lot of renewables, a lot of coal, less coal, but a lot of gas. Yep. We're really sucking on that gas teat right now. So
there's a massive liquid natural gas market in Australia, so massive market for it. And I don't understand why we don't look at these things practically. Like we get to a point in this country where we become hysterical about things and we throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is a massive concern in itself, because where's the baby? So
when you throw baby out the bathwater, you mean like the Libs are saying, renewables have caused this, and Labor's saying coal's evil?
Yeah.
They're both just going crazy.
I'm more of the fact that we have decided that renewables are the way to go, and we've only looked at solar and wind as being the primaries of that. With anything in life, particularly in finance, we look to diversify, right? Spread that risk across a couple options. I think it's time to have the conversation about nuclear. I really do.
Which is why LDP was so big on running on nuclear, which is interesting. But you know what? Good news. At least we will never have bushfires ever again. All right? See this tweet on that screen, everyone? This is from a Facebook group called Manly Living, a lovely area of Sydney that I miss dearly. She says, many houses on the northern beaches were without power this morning, and there will be more blackouts to come. And I know it's a bit cold, but it's a very small price to pay as we finally take real action on climate change and ensure that we never have bushfires, floods, or earthquakes ever again.
Yes.
This is why we have Sam Eddy on the panel today. We have a mental health crisis in Australia. All right, moving on. We need to talk about the rise in the minimum wage for all Australians.
Taking all the relevant considerations into account, we have decided to award an increase of $40 per week to the national minimum wage, which amounts to an increase of 5.2%. The national minimum wage will be $812.60 per week, or $21.38 per hour. This level of increase will protect the real value of the wages of the lowest paid workers.
Can I just point out the language before we get stripped into this? Ready?
Please.
All right. I, whoever I am, in my ivory tower, will award you, plebeian Australians, dirty, unwashed, a little bit more money. Like this is market. That's not market. What have we become, Australia?
That's a real concern, let alone the fact that there are no economic principles that sit behind it. And we're talking like basic economics.
Finance guy, explain. Explain.
Well, no, so the long and the short of it is that when you increase the minimum wage, I think it's 60% of all Australians are working in small business in some capacity.
60%, okay, but a lot, yeah.
There's a lot, right? Yeah. Go conservative, let's say half of all Australians are tied into small business.
Yeah.
Now, those costs obviously are now on the small business who... They're doing it tough. They've just done 2 years of COVID, longest lockdown city in the world, a number of other factors there. That cost then gets passed on to the consumer in the cost of goods and services.
Right. So the coffees go up.
Coffee goes up. Your lettuce goes to what, $15? We're at $12.
That wasn't because of a minimum wage rise, but I see what you're saying.
No, but basically that flow-on effect will happen in that manner. So ultimately, say you've got $812 additional per week.
Yeah.
Well, if the cost of living has now gone up by $900, you're actually worse off.
Well, this is why the Labor government demanded that they raise it by at least inflation, or more than inflation. And inflation is, you're laughing because you know it's rubbish, but inflation is 5.1% in this country, and everyone at home is laughing when I say 5.1%. But the official rate from this hypothetical basket of goods, from which they keep removing things to massage it anyway, is 5.1. The minimum wage increase is 5.2. But the argument for it is Walmart, we don't have Walmart, Bunnings and big stores can afford it. Look at them fat cats on their big stuff. And you Cursia, you're trying to, I'm struggling over here in the minimum wage. You just hate the small player, And so the fact that you're pointing out small business is interesting. But as we see our world go more towards centralised, everyone's working for Coles, everyone's working for a big conglomerate, this argument is making more sense, right? Than this need for a regulation, for minimum wage controls and all of that. Aren't we heading towards that centralised role as small business goes down?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're not only doing that from a government standpoint now, we're now doing it in the free market, which brings the question, is it actually a free market? Because you're introducing all of these different controls and then you're centralising power to only the big players. Well, we know that the bigger players, they use their power to basically, dictate terms and conditions to their employees. So you don't have as much of that when you're dealing with small business because small business isn't set up for that.
That's true.
So they're not designed for that at all.
Maybe people need to support small business, not just with where they spend,
Absolutely.
but where they work.
Absolutely.
Hey, why do you want to work at Amazon in Australia? Go work at a small business, a newspaper shop or something.
But again...
Or here. There's a kid that I wanted to employ here. There's a couple actually who wanted to work here. One of them wanted to volunteer, which is nice. And I was like, I really need the protections of an employee relationship or a casual relationship or contract relationship. I couldn't afford him because his value to me, he's only like 15 or something. And there was another kid as well, same deal. I can't afford them. And this minimum wage increase has taken that dream of them working for me further away.
Well, if you look at anywhere around the world where they do this, right? They increase the minimum wage. what happens? Staff hours, existing staff, have their hours cut because the business can't afford to provide the same level of hours that they were doing previously. So you're earning less income as a result.
Yes.
So as an employee,
Yes.
because all of a sudden you've gone from 30 hours a week and they go, sorry guys, we've only got 15 for you this week. So they've lost money there, right? They still have to absorb the costs of the additional that they're getting with everything else, because inflation is pushing the price of everything up anyway. Yeah. So they've still got to, for a cafe, buy, whatever, coffee beans and etc. Yeah. That's all going up. That then gets passed on to the consumer anyway.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually work. And it's the most basic principle of economics. That's scary, because the individuals that are making these decisions, politicians and the like, they have no concept of simple economics. And the only people who will pay for that are everyday folk, everyday Australians.
But hang on, isn't it true that, say, it's 40% work for big places, and I don't know how many on minimum wage, but the point is there will be thousands or tens of thousands of Australians who now will see their pay packet go up as a result of this decision. And
well, so I don't begrudge anyone getting a pay rise from that perspective. Yeah. I'm in a relatively fortunate position, so just purely on someone getting more money in their bank account is great. I guess, I don't know what we're saying here, but what I think, and I guess my boring answer across a lot of this stuff is, what's the transparency around what is the cost of this wage increase? Because I think if we all understand that there is a cost and it's transparent, and then we all decide to accept it as a society, we might go, fine, we're willing to pay a bit more for our coffees or this, but let's be clear that there will be a cost for it, and are people who are maybe arguing for the wage increase knowing that then small businesses might cut hours. So I think it
was a psychology question I'd like to get your thoughts on, because what you're saying is, I'm not telling you what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is that the two different presentations of this are not coming together quite. What is going on here, in the sense that you've got some people just playing the game of, look, you'll have more money in your bank account. Don't you deserve? We value your children. Don't they deserve a better future and more money to take them to horse riding or whatever it is? So that's the messaging, the psychological messaging to one side, and the other side will say, I guess what we're saying, which is, numbers, it's going to be passed on. So how do you get this messaging to meet?
Well, I think that, the work I do is all about empowerment. So, self-empowerment. So whether it be mental health, education, whatever it might be, if we then accept that there might be an initial wage rise, there is going to be a cost. What is that? Are we prepared to accept it? But then what are we doing in the interim to help people understand what's going on, so that they can make their own choices about their career, about where they're going to work? If they go down this path, this might be some of the limitations. If they're going to work for a big corporate or a small business, how do they get on the front foot to make conscious choices about their career, as opposed to following a linear path that might end them up on a low wage? Nothing wrong with that if that's what you choose, but is it a conscious choice? That's what I'm getting at.
But there's a problem here, right? That conscious choice is, there's no incentive for politicians or media or anyone to do what you're doing, because maybe I'm being a bit conspiratorial here, but in the US, I feel like you want to keep the black population voting for Democrats. Therefore, you want to keep them lower socioeconomically, and then offer them a whole bunch of handouts through affirmative action programs. And in California now, if you're black, you get extra this, you get that, whatever. Yep. So I don't understand how that's what you're suggesting is possible, because bringing awareness to a bunch of people who are now cheering for Labor for bringing up this wage increase, Labor's not going to want you to come and get them empowered.
That's only some people. There'll be some people cheering, and so you're not going to get through to everyone. So all you can do is influence, in one conversation at a time, a group of people at a time, to hopefully, for those who are ready to hear the message or willing to hear it, then they might start to go, hang on, okay, well, so I'm stuck in this industry, I'm not getting the money I need for whatever goals I want.
Yeah.
I can start to make different choices. I might have to retrain, I might have to just negotiate a wage rise for myself. Okay. Not every place is unionised. Unions can be good, they're not bad or good, they can be problematic or good. Yeah. So I think if people have, we're talking to anyone who's really willing to listen.
Okay. But don't you feel that class of person is shrinking as we see politicians start to divide and pigeonhole and keep people in zones?
I think as the busyness of life, this is a bit of a philosophical point around something quite specific, if we're so busy, we're running around like headless chickens day to day, then it is going to be very hard for people to to pause reflect and go, okay, what do I really want? What's really important? And what influence do I have over my own reality? And some people will say, well, people who are of a lower socio-economic background have less opportunity, perhaps, but that doesn't necessarily help them if they want to change their circumstances. So it's all about information and understanding. And then, we can only offer the opportunity, and if people want to take it, great. If not, then there's always a cost. And so we can't sort of apologise for why life is not fair. We can't sort of, in my view, go down that road.
Really?
We have to acknowledge that it is unfair.
And we can help and assist.
How do we then, open up the conversation, provide information, be transparent about why?
Okay. So is our message to those who may be stuck on a minimum wage to be self-aware, think about what you said, think about what they want to do, look if they have to retrain, and not rely on the next time we want Albo to raise the minimum wage in 5 years from now, because that's a pretty disempowered state to live in.
Yeah, I mean, that's my view.
I personally think that that's going to play out, like you're going to have issues with that. Because the other thing is that if everybody's moving towards the larger corporates and what have you,
They seem to be.
and we're phasing out the smaller business aspect, well, then it comes back to supply and demand. All of a sudden, there is a larger supply of employees, which we're now seeing at the moment. There's a smaller supply, so the demand is higher, which is why businesses are paying overs to get people in. Now, if the supply all of a sudden increases and the demand is what it is, that means that's going to come off. So it's going to push wage prices, like wages down basically. And then that comes back to, those basic economic principles that I was talking to. So as much as people are cheering it on and clapping and applauding, I think it's great that people are getting an increase. My question is the value of that increase and how that's going to play out when it eventually hits your pocket at the end of the day.
It's the same as the healthcare bonus, isn't it? For healthcare workers.
Oh, the $3,000.
Yeah, I'm not going to begrudge a nurse, a healthcare worker getting $3,000. I think great. I think they deserve it. How do we quantify what deserving is, or what you're worth? But I think great. But then of course there's going to be a cost. And what is that cost? Where's that money coming from? So, what won't happen as a result of that? And then are we happy to accept that?
There's a, beware governments bearing gifts, I like to say. There is a difference between New South Wales, Don Perrottet is giving them, I think, $2,500, and Daniel's giving them in Victoria $3,000. But in New South Wales, it's a true gift. Thank you, we love you guys, we support you, here's the money, done. In Victoria comes a lot of strings.
Terms and conditions.
Yes.
You can have half now, but make sure you're still working throughout the dodgy 2-week depths of winter in hospitals, and then you get $2,500 in a month and a half's time. I just want to point out, it's when people claim, because he uses the same language, gift, support, love, but then do all this. That's common.
Yeah.
My mum did that to me all the time. It's common everywhere.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think it should be. I mean, to my mind, it's recognition of work already done, isn't it?
Not in Victoria.
No, well, that's what it should be. That's what it should be,
Yeah,
absolutely.
correct.
As opposed to, I can understand they're trying to retain people and keep them motivated and
Call
keep
it
them
that
in
then.
there.
Call it a retention scheme.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Liars in government. Okay, what's this going to do to inflation? Because is this what we're going to see? Okay, it's great that they're getting more money hitting their bank accounts, you said earlier, but what are they actually getting hitting their bank accounts? Because money's inflating, right? As inflation goes crazy, is the minimum wage just going to chase it? And our politicians' wage just going to chase it? And I'm a small business, we're just going to suffer and die in a ditch. I'm going to have to go and get a job at Amazon Web Services in Wetherill Park in Sydney.
Well, that's part of the problem, right? Because at the end of the day, it's great to have people be independent of, big organisations, government, because ultimately your success is tied into the rest of the economy anyway. You pay taxes, you purchase other items, you hire more staff, you're ultimately feeding back to the economy. But when we phase that out, you become more reliant on government, and these days the hybrid of what we seem to be doing, because it is a form of corporate socialism. We ultimately now have inserted big organisations into the mix, which is very interesting, because all we're doing is rehashing old concepts and tweaking them slightly and hoping that this is going to work in everybody's favour. If you look at the United States, like with the exit of Trump and the Biden administration coming in, they did the same things that we're now looking to do, and that terrifies me.
We'll end up where they are, yeah.
Well, have a look at them. 2 years in, he's got a 38% approval rating based on all of the things that he said he was going to fix. And they've blown up. Look at the prices of gas over there, astronomical. Food, let alone food shortages.
Their official interest rate is like 7.5 or something.
Yeah. But it's peak insanity, and we have the benefit of this country of being able to look at things and say, oh, they did that over there, that worked, that didn't. Maybe we'll opt for X, Y, Z and eliminate the following. We don't seem to do that. We follow blindly, and it terrifies me because you've got an example right in front of you.
Well, the election result shows that people are not listening to us anyway. They're just you've got to imagine. Look, some economists that I've seen in the US are looking at the basket of goods that we keep referring to, and they're kind of playing with it to say inflation is only 7.9% in the US. They think it's somewhere between 12 and 14, these economists in the US, which feels about right. I think if we all look around, in Australia, we're just starting to feel this, but it certainly doesn't feel like 5%. It feels like, maybe 10, maybe 9.
Yeah, I was going to say 9, 10.
It's feeling like that, isn't it, in everything? Well, okay. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, Secretary, President Anthony Albanese, who has made us all richer somehow magically, moving some numbers around a page.
What your listeners need to know is a mass psychosis is when there is a groupthink that develops that's so strong that it leads to something horrific. And the examples are these mass suicides that occur in these religious cults. The example is Nazi Germany, when people walk into gas chambers and were gassed. These horrific things. And 4 elements here. It's very important, Joe. First, there must be a period of prolonged isolation, lockdowns. Number 2, there must be a withdrawal of things taken away from people that they used to enjoy. That's happened. Number 3, there must be constant, incessant, free-floating anxiety. All this news cycle, all the deaths and the hospitalizations, more variant mutant strains, everything, people becoming scared over and over again. And the last thing, number 4, the capper. The capper is there must be a single solution offered by an entity in authority. And in this case is clear. Worldwide, the solution was vaccination. Everybody must take the vaccination. It's not a U.S. program. It's not a European. It's everywhere. And you know what, Joe? It doesn't matter what vaccine it is. It could be ChinaVac, CoronaVac. It could be Novavax. It could be Pfizer, Moderna, J&J. It's interesting that it doesn't even matter what vaccine it is. It's just take a vaccine, take any vaccine. And so what mass psychosis says is, number 4, the solution, there's no limit to the absurdity of the solution.
Okay, so mass formation psychosis, one of the reasons why a lot of people, I think, are jumping to support or enjoy this this theory, as I am, is because it's based on a emergent principle of behaviour. And I think throughout this last 2 years, where we've seen extraordinary things around the world, the rise of authoritarianism, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, we've certainly seen it rise. Some people have come out and said, oh, it's Bill Gates, it's blah, blah, blah. But a lot of us have said, no, hang on. Why do we ascribe malevolence and malice where incompetence will often do? And so for those of us who are looking for emergent phenomenon to explain what we've seen, in other words, just the natural behavior of humans, incentive structures, mass formation psychosis certainly fits the bill. I'll read to you a little bit of an article commenting on the last couple of years that we've seen around the world. This is from the US, saying, the fascinating and terrifying thing about totalitarian regimes is not the horrific deeds that they commit, because mere dictatorships and warlords and psychopaths are fully capable of that as well. Instead, it's that their overwhelming ideological control seeps into every fabric of society, and it's a fervour with which neighbour turns on neighbour. My goodness, have we seen that? And friends and family members happily denounce trespassers of the stated dogma. And here's the key. Nobody really seems in control of whatever force is pulling it forward, and usually nobody is pulling corrupt, invisible strings. Everyone is simply enchanted by a ideological spell under which they all operate. And once an avalanche has begun, tumbling down the mountain, it exerts the most unstoppable of forces. So, gentlemen, what do we think of this theory from Mattias Desmet and his new book, The Totalitarianism of Mass Panic?
Well, I mean, it's nothing new, really. So I don't think it's isolated to what's happened in the last couple of years. It's just I guess the non-triggering term I use is unconsciousness. It's simply unconsciousness playing out on a bigger scale. But if you read books from, gurus or spiritual gurus like Eckhart Tolle, for example, who look at these from a philosophical perspective, you know that humans have been killing each other, raping each other, murdering each other for centuries. And so is the last 2 years, when we think about lockdowns or restricting liberties or whatever the issues are, is it any worse than that? Or
well, it's different. We're not raping and pillaging each other randomly like barbarians. There's a formation of mass of people and tribes and
yes,
social pressures, and you're killing grandma and that kind of thing.
Yes. Well, there's I guess so humans. What I'm trying to say is that humans act unconsciously. So humans don't tend to step back and have a holistic view on life and go, well, what's the as Gigi Foster says, she talks about lockdowns, for example, what's the cost benefit analysis? So what is the cost of the measures that we're doing to prevent the spread of the virus, death, etc.? Fine, of course we need to look at that, but what's the benefit of the measures? What's the cost? And that's never ever looked at. But we have to look at human beings. What are we doing to each other day to day? What's the cost of all the food I put into my mouth, the exercise I'm not doing, the work that I do, how often I'm working. It's all linked to health outcomes and how we are. This was just a specific crisis, a real eruption or change to the way we live that has shocked people. And sort of woken a lot of people up into the unconscious way that we probably all live in some form anyway.
But this is more unique and specific than what you're describing. You're just talking about unconscious, what you've just said, but this is talking about a combined, like almost like an army that is not centrally controlled. It's emergent phenomena, but it's people that all get on board a narrative and then slam down it's like a pecking order. I just bought chickens. I'm obsessed with chickens. But if you have 6 chickens and you add in another one, those 6 chickens later on, you add in this other one a year later, they'll peck him down and keep him down. That's what happens now if you're not vaccinated, or it's not even if you're not wearing a mask, or if you're not locking down, whatever the thing is.
Yes.
So there's something bigger going on than just humans are acting unconsciously.
I mean, I'm probably not explaining myself very well, but that was happening anyway. If you don't dress a certain way, you're outcasted. Bullying, all that stuff happens anyway if you don't. Religion is a classic one.
True.
If you're part of Group A, then you don't belong to Group B. If you have a different coloured, when you put coloured, you dye your hair a different colour, that was seen as crazy.
Yes.
A number of years ago, and we now accept it. So it's been like that for many, many years, and of course it just heightened when there's a physical threat in the form of a virus. Whether how dramatic that is or not is up for debate. But if there is a perceived physical threat, then people go into flight, fight or freeze even quicker.
I see what you mean.
And so I don't think it really is any different. I mean, I'd love to say it is, and that might appease a lot of people. Go, yes, it's awful. It's just in the last 2 years, but that doesn't, to my mind, offer a deeper learning that this is stuff that's been going on, and we all do it. We all go unconscious from time to time.
You're too balanced, mate. You're too balanced. Let me tell you the four ingredients that Professor Peter McCullough just mentioned. So first of all, you have to have a problem. Mattias Desmet theorises that you need to have generalised loneliness, social isolation, and a lack of social bonds. And certainly we've had that pre-existing COVID for a long time. I remember hearing about this in 2003. Then you need a lack of meaning in life. Number 2, that's certainly the case in terms of our jobs and lack of meaning and rise in mental health issues and existential crises and all that kind of thing. Then you have to have number 3, free-floating anxiety, which is things that are invisible, things like over-anxiety about climate change, for example, being pushed a lot. And then finally, you have to have frustration and aggression, number 4. And then when you have all these come together, according to Mattias Desmet, then you have all this pent-up, all these issues are pent up, and you're looking for a target. And so this is what happens.
Yeah.
We talked about in the interview you did with me, when people yell at you on the road, right?
Yes.
This is the thing, right? We're all unconscious and we're bottling, and as soon as we find a target, the unvaccinated, bang, or whatever it is. And if that happens at a society-wide level, that's what Mattias Desmet is saying. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, there you go. Mass formation psychosis.
Well, it is what he's saying, but I think it's all to do with it manifests individually first. So it's your ego coming in, that false sense of self. People call it the protective part of the personality. So you'll hear about ego, but it's the ego is useful when the car's coming towards you and you're about to be hit because you get selfish. You want to look at all the external threats so you can survive. And so when we've been in this hypervigilant state for, especially over the last 2 years, so that's why it's all, extra hype around it. And so that's perhaps why he's talking about it now. But it was there anyway, is my argument. That's all.
Yeah, I'm seeing it too. What you're saying, that it's always there. There's an ICU pediatrician that I wonder if I can find his image in post and we'll put it on the screen. But he's literally he's in Sydney and he's literally like putting masks on his like 1-year-old, even though he himself says it's recommended against it. And then he's building a HEPA filter pram, like he's covered the pram and the baby. And then he's championing in China. There's a couple who have a baby carrier, a cat carrier, and they've sealed it in and put the baby inside. And he's absolutely championing all this stuff. And he's also very, very excited that in the US now they've approved 6-month to 5-year-old for COVID vaccines. So some of these people are, like this guy, he's a high level, with respect to him, he's probably quite good at his job as a pediatrician in an ICU ward in Sydney. However, you can feel the anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how stable that man's life is as I view what I can through Twitter.
Yeah. Well, when we feel something, when you feel it, if you have a thought about something, whether on one level we might see it as irrational or overkill, if you've got a corresponding feeling, and we've probably talked about this before, a bit of a flood of adrenaline, heart race, sweaty palms, something that comes along with this irrational thought, it's very hard to ignore. So even at some level, you might have had some awareness that is this really necessary, you can't ignore it. And that's part of the unconsciousness. You're living by how you feel when that no longer serves you, but you just got no way of seeing it. And you've got no understanding of what's going on.
But these guys go further. These guys are conscious because they literally lay out the reasons that he defended himself on Twitter, why he broke the medical advice to mask up a 10-month-old. And why he, it's very illegal and dangerous to modify baby carriers, put things around there, you could suffocate your baby, all sorts of things. And he justified himself through all of these very academic reasons. So he's very conscious.
Well, I mean, you can use facts, figures, statistics, we see it all the time, evidence in any unconscious way you want. And again, he might have a feeling and then he'll find the evidence to corroborate that feeling.
Okay. Right, I'm just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt because he seems like a smart guy with a million qualifications.
Yeah.
But he's also appearing to be a bit crazy with the way he's behaving. You want to say anything about mass formation psychosis or we'll move on?
No, look, I just think that it is incredibly concerning to see the polarisation of society on these sorts of topics. And like you said, people not having the ability to stand back, look at it, assess the situation, remove your emotion, remove your bias, because everybody has a bias going into things, right? Like that's just a natural sort of part of the human experience. But to go in and not step back then and look at it and say, hang on a second, this is a little bit, because we know that children on a, COVID perspective, they're relatively untouched by it. Like you've got to have some sort of underlying issue.
Not even funny.
So why are we then taking the additional risk of potentially suffocating the child
All right, I've got to show. Okay, I can't believe this now. You're making me do it. I've got to show you this image from LinkedIn.
Please
this
do.
is Professor Erwin Lowe. Professor Erwin Lowe here is stating that a study that he's one of these experts that along with other luminaries like Professor Catherine Bennett, epidemiologists, who just consistently, I think they do their best and they're honest in their approach, but they are consistently just parroting a government line. And so I start to wonder, are you going to actually stand for something? But anyway, Professor Erwin Lowe, he has said here that studies showing children have very strong innate immune systems as opposed to adaptive immunity when you have the T cells, B cells, memory, basically your body remembering a virus. And he's saying here that children have a very good response to variants even from having a natural infection. But then he goes on to say, however, they even develop T cells, B cells, adaptive immunity, memory cells to these viruses through natural exposure, but not as many as adults. So therefore we need to vaccinate them. So if you just, it's all a bit complicated, but if you think about what this post is saying, he's saying children are very, very good at naturally fighting off COVID-19, and they're even getting memory cells to fight other variants. However, not as much as others, so we need to vaccinate them. I don't understand this kind of strange logic. Children are very, very good at fighting COVID-19 without a vaccine, so we need to vaccinate them.
Well, it's a reductionist approach, I think, to medicine that you're saying.
Yep.
And so you might be a specialist in one area. So I'm not sure who this gentleman is, but he perhaps has a specialty in immunity or virology or whatever it is.
Sorry, he was the chief.
Isn't it?
No, this guy. This is Professor Owen Lowe. He was the chief of medicine for Monash Health in Victoria.
Right, okay.
And he was a lawyer as well. He did lawyering
right.
for a while, and now he's the chief of medicine Australia-wide for St Vincent's. You know how St Vincent's hospitals all over the nation? Yes,
Yep.
that's who he is. Go on.
Oh, right. Well, I was going to say, without knowing his specific expertise, but even if you just look at it through that narrow lens of immunity, then you're not really looking at, so even if they do get the infection, what's going to happen? There's probably no real risk to kids anyway.
He said that.
As far as
Yes.
I'm seeing. So therefore, then why would you vaccinate them? And then if you're not looking at the whole person, health, nutrition, exercise, stress, because we know if you're a bit stressed, flight response is active, suppresses the immune function. So if you're not looking at any of that, then you're going to grasp at all the quick fixes, the pills, all the different medicines you can do, because potentially that's what most adults do. We grab for the quick fix, go to the chemist, get the solution, go to the doctor, get something to fix the thing that will probably sort itself out anyway. When we're talking about, just general colds, sore throats, whatever.
It feels like all roads lead to that. All roads lead to a pharmaceutical in their thinking. And in this case, all roads lead to vaccinate your children. And whatever the study comes out, children do poorly, they need to be vaccinated. Children do well, they need to be vaccinated. It's unbelievable. It reminds me of, do you know Michael West Media? Do you know Michael West?
Yeah,
I follow him and enjoy him and try and use him to keep me in check because he's anti-liberal and great guy. I like his work. Follow it, love it. However, it seems like all roads lead to corporations are scum and the Liberal Party's evil.
Yeah.
Every single post. And now energy crisis is because corporations are corrupt and scum and the Liberal Party is evil.
Yep.
And so you start to wonder from even really good people like Michael West Media, who I applaud, and I all suggest you go follow and give him some likes and check out his stuff. Michael West Media is all over the place, YouTube. But you start to lose credibility when all roads lead to Dan Andrews is the devil, which is why I don't do that, because I don't believe he's the devil.
Yep.
I'm being honest. Sometimes I think the Greens have great policies. Sometimes I think most of the time they have terrible policies. Sometimes I think LDP have bad policies,
Sure.
but mostly I think your policies are fantastic.
Thank you.
But when people get really partisan and this party can do no wrong, be careful.
Yeah, I think we've got to, we were speaking about this before the show, you've got to maintain that that critical lens by which you view everything. And I think if you have a holistic view of what they're presenting, when I studied my psych masters in the UK, they were very good at talking about qualitative versus quantitative research and then declaration of biases of researchers. So what's the researcher's bias in their question? Have they declared it? Fine, let's look at the results in that context, because things aren't bad or good, they're all neutral until you give it some thought. So corporations aren't bad or good, it's what they do sometimes, or politicians or politics. I'm the same. I think all parties have some great policies and all parties have some terrible policies.
The ratios are different by party to party, I'd say.
Absolutely.
All right, that was a bit of a rant section. Most importantly, we need to start giving some love to our fair Premier Daniel here in this state, because one of his friends, PR Guy 17, is under fire, and it is our duty to support PR Guy 17.
There was an anonymous person on Twitter leading the cheer squad for Premier Daniel Andrews, known only as PR Guy, but sounding not just, well, in my opinion, a little bit vindictive, but unusually well informed, particularly on the Labor lines of the day. And with 80,000 followers, including a number of journalists, quite influential. So the speculation began, is PR Guy actually a Dan Andrews staffer or an employee of a Labor-aligned PR company?
Are you ready to see me piss off a lot of people who follow Dissentable?
Go for it.
Ready?
Go for it.
Ready? They're going to unsubscribe. I stand with PR Guy 17, and not just on this matter, on many. Can you believe it?
Why?
Yeah, I was going to say.
That was important. Why don't you like him?
No,
Okay.
I'm not declaring my opinion. I was just curious as to what yours is.
Okay, well, I'll give my opinion through a question. Why do people hate PR Guy 17 so much? This is what I don't understand. Yes, he's stirring the pot, but a lot of the stuff he posts before the election, he's off his game on the election. He lost his satire, he lost his sarcasm, and he was just straight up a lackey for the Labor Party. That was boring. PR Guy 17, do better, mate. But before that, I quite enjoyed him. He posts some of the stuff I might post just to stir the pot. People are so angry, like, he's wrong and you shouldn't stand. I can't throw out my principles here. This court case, which is saying he must be unmasked, I don't agree with it. Because, to answer your question, why? In this case, the government has been trying to unmask all of us for a long time now. Basically since the Patriot Act in 2001, right? Here in Australia, we had ScoMo pushing for de-identification, unmasking of all of us. You've got to have a digital ID in order to get a social media account. So there is an overall long-term history that is going the wrong way, in my opinion, destroying anonymity on the internet. So this latest thing, everyone hates PR Guy 17, the right wing hates him, so they're cheering for increased government surveillance, court-ordered demasking. I would much prefer he was demasked by some other way. Yes. So I know operatives inside political parties that I can't name, I better not say the party, who were dedicating resources to private investigations to unmask PR Guy and determine whether he was or she was from Daniel Andrews' staff, which would be a scandal.
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
Right? But the courts, I don't agree with this.
I think that comes back to Twitter, though, because Twitter have that policy around anonymity. So
they agreed to the court order straight away.
But that's the only way they'll actually divulge that information.
That's good.
Yeah, so that's a safety mechanism built in, like Twitter, which I don't think they have a lot of them, but that one particularly works quite well. The problem is that, and I don't believe that PR guys should be completely and utterly exposed for everybody to know.
Really?
But I think that there needs to be a particular level of accountability, because if it is being operated and funded through Dan Andrews' office, that's taxpayer money.
It is.
That's
need to know.
That's a propaganda arm, right? That's what the CCP do. This is like, all sort of governments that operate in that manner use. They use that to be able to influence society, public perception. And when you have that ability, because everybody goes back to the law, right? But the law is what it is. But if public perception of something like, for instance, vaccine mandates, for argument's sake, are not popular with removing of mandates, then the law's not really going to enact it, because the law tends to work with public perception too,
That's true.
Right? So if you're influencing public perception, and I'm a free speech advocate, like I believe that the LDP want to enshrine free speech in the Constitution, right, as an amendment. But if you're using that to then shift the narrative in public and society in general in your favour, then that's illegal. There's no two ways about that.
So what's the next step, though? So I agree with that. But the next step is where do you then drop your principles and say, the Edward Snowdens and the Assanges of this world, and then the PR, just anonymity should be gone?
Well, no, I don't believe that's the case. But I do believe that if it gets drawn back to Dan Andrews' office, then that's where you draw the line. I don't believe we need to unveil PR Guy 17. I don't believe we need to see the man behind the curtain and all that. But if it sits within Andrew's office, then that's entirely a different matter.
So you're saying it's okay for the courts or the government, in this, when I say government, the three strands of government. So the courts, the government, to come in and unmask him to determine whether he's in Danny Andrews' office or not. That's okay.
I believe it should be limited to that point too. So
And
there
they
should be a
keep it sealed.
This is
confidentiality piece.
about unmasking him, so there's a legal person that you can be
There's a defamation
sued.
suit, yes.
So it's slightly different. I guess that's the...
I'm not really commenting on the defamation suit. I don't know enough about it.
No, neither do I.
Follow it. But I'm just talking about the cheer squad I've seen saying, yay, use the courts to... But then when we try and use the courts to unmask someone on your team, you'll be angry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the privacy, in the digital age, we're sort of all tracked, watched, and I think it's important as human beings to have spheres to be anonymous, to say what you think without worrying about who's around you. I think that's important psychologically for mental health. So yeah, this one I'm in two minds, because I don't know if someone's defamed someone, should they have the right to be able to sue them?
How has he defamed someone? Let's say,
I don't know. I've got no idea.
I know, I haven't seen the case. But let's say some random anonymous PR guy, 15, gets on and says, the guy behind Discernible's a pedophile and just defames me, right? I'm like, go ahead. I'm like, okay, there's some random, nobody knows who it is, called PR guy 15, who hates Discernible clearly and says I'm a pedophile. Like, how's that defaming me? Like, I don't know, who's going to believe that? I don't understand how that's a threat to me when an anonymous person. Now, if you come out and say that, I'm like, hey, mate, you're dragging my character. If Daniel Andrews comes out and says that, even worse, he's really defaming me. But so I don't understand why people are so afraid of some kid in a bedroom called PR Guy 17 or in Daniel Andrews' office. I understand the corruption play, but I don't understand the defamation play. Who cares what some anonymous troll says online?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with you on that point as well. So I don't really know where I stand on this one, because I agree with with what you're saying. I mean, we should disregard all that stuff. It's just BS, and people should be able to express what they want anonymously, I think, as well.
And there are problems with that.
Yeah, there are. It's hugely toxic.
Yes, it's very toxic.
And some people can't let it go, of course.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets nasty and problematic. But
is it a clever play though?
What?
In order to find out if it is actually coming out of the government, like PR Guy 17.
Yes, do a defamation suit.
You know what I mean?
Fine.
Like, it's not necessarily
sure.
the actual goal.
Now I disagree with it even more. Because you're doing a clever play, you're corrupting our judicial precedents in order to do something. Anyway, all right. That's enough. Look, I really do and I also stand with PR Guy 17 on a lot of other issues, in the sense that he calls out some of the dodgy stuff on the right wing. Great. And you know what? The more voices, the better. Half the time on Discernible, you were talking about freedom and free markets and how terrible the Labor government is. Well, of course we need other people to be out there saying Labor government's great and Discernible's full of crap. Great, let's do it. I love it. I love a wide variety of opinions. Let's talk about something far more important. Let's talk about what's going on in China, because it's not just in China, it's happening in Bunnings and Kmart and the Good Guys as well.
Chinese netizens are questioning whether the COVID health pass was being used as a tool to prevent many depositors from withdrawing their money from many rural banks in China. On Monday, June 13th, a large number of depositors reported that their health code changed from the original green code to a red code after scanning the code in Henan province. Many of them also got red codes for high-speed rail, which means they could not use it. So far, in China, Henan Rural Bank allegedly is the only bank to have a so-called depositor code. The health code in itself is a location tracking app used in China during the 2019 COVID-19 epidemic. The health code is used as a personal electronic passport. After scanning the code, one can know the health status of the holder. It is used as a pass to enter and exit public places. Previously, many depositors in multiple areas across China have decided to go to Zhengzhou in Henan province on Monday, June 13th, to find the relevant departments to discuss their difficulty of withdrawing money. But their health code turned red after they registered to go to Zhengzhou for this purpose. Some depositors' health codes turned red long before they had a chance to set foot in Zhengzhou. They then said that they are remotely assigned red codes.
Okay, before we get to Kmart, Bunnings and the Good Guys here in Australia, let's talk about China. This is so disturbing, my friend. This is... Okay. What the story didn't tell you is why this is happening, okay? So in China, we have a 2-month block on a whole lot of people accessing their own funds. So the result is we have individuals unable to access their savings to live. We have companies unable to get money out to pay their staff. So they decide to go and do some kind of a protest, I guess, but they're going to travel to the central province of, was it Henan? Henan province in China. The government gets wind of this, and in China you can't access certain services unless you have your green tick, like we had in Australia, right? So it just prevents the protest from ever getting off the ground. This is the stuff. This is the wet dreams that Justin Trudeau and others and Daniel Andrews would love, because he struggled with that trucker protest. Imagine him being able to stop the trucker protest before it even happened. That's what happened in China. Change the tick to the green to red. They can't travel. My God, resist digital government IDs, please. But anyway, horrified as well?
I honestly have no words. Like it literally terrifies me. This is beyond Orwellian, truly beyond Orwellian. The ability for your government to dictate to you how you go about expressing your discontent sort of view with the government itself, who are there to serve the people. That's the role of government. This is not a monarchy. This is not some sort of totalitarian, sort of vision of society. The fact that they can do that and prevent you from wrong think. Like, let's remember that. This is wrong think in their eyes.
It's incredible.
It is beyond terrifying to me. Yeah.
It's. I think for our viewers who are not in Victoria, we had a similar thing, to a lesser extent, but a similar thing in Melbourne where we had protests, regular protests. And so rather than shoot us, well, they did shoot us in the back with rubber bullets and so on, but to try and prevent that, they did things like shutting down our public transport system. Similar thing. They're just trying to get ahead of it and engineer society and put up fences before you can even get out of control. It's one step away from pre-crime, which but has everyone forgotten we had pre-crime? Because you're not that into politics like I am, right? All right, good. So let me tell you about this. In Victoria, they tried to pass a preemptive bill. Yeah. So this is not a crazy platform you're on. I'm serious about this. I read the bill. They tried to say if the designated authorised officer reasonably believes that you would disobey a pandemic order, they can preemptively detain you before you've committed a crime.
Yeah, that's quite scary.
Yeah, it failed. It didn't pass, but that was trying to get it through in Victoria.
Yeah, well, I think it's disturbing to say the least. I think a lot of people through the pandemic, with the restrictions you just talked about, Victoria, were everyone's like, well, there's a physical threat, so we can kind of justify everything. And so I think people, that's how people can justify it in their mind. I think most people can accept on some level that there's something not quite right about it. There's something not quite right, but then we look to the externals and go, there's a physical threat, okay, that's fine, I just want to go back to my day-to-day. So when you look at something like that, that will never come to Australia. It's disturbing that the government's restricting having access to your own money. I know what it's like if you can't get through to the bank to try and get a withdrawal for one purchase for one day, let alone having your whole life restricted.
Like when your credit card doesn't work or something.
Totally, and they won't. You can't get through. They can't identify you because you can't remember your password. Or that's just a very minor, not important thing. But you can still even feel a little restriction there.
That's what's happened in China.
Correct.
Same thing.
No, exactly. And so it is. And we can all relate very minorly. And so if that's happening on a larger scale, that's very disturbing. And as you say, if it's used to stop protests, to stop people's free speech, to gathering, to forming ideas, that is something that we should avoid at all costs, really.
I think what we're witnessing, though, is not a nightmare. It's just a manifestation of that great prophetic text. Have you seen the prophetic Bible called Black Mirror?
Yes, I have.
All right. If you haven't seen it, here's a short clip from an episode about a world that we'll soon all be living in with social credit scores.
And that's one brushed sweep. You want a cookie with that? It's on the house.
Sounds awesome. See you tomorrow, JJ.
See you, Lacey.
Hi there, how you doing?
I am wonderful.
I am so sorry. That flight is canceled.
No.
Customer incident at the other end.
What? So when is the next flight?
Yeah, they're all kind of full.
I booked this weeks ago. It's my best friend's wedding.
I'm sorry.
I have to get there. I have to.
Okay, I mean, let's see what we can do.
Oh, thank you.
I see there's one standby seat on another plane leaving tonight.
Oh, okay.
That's reserved for members of our Prime Flight program. You got to be a 4.2 or over to qualify.
Oh, I'm a 4.2.
I'm afraid you're actually a 4.183.
Oh. Well, that's not my fault. Some woman dinged me down in the cab. Can't you just...
I'm sorry, it won't let me book it without the correct ranking.
But it's so close.
There's just nothing I can do.
Christ, I mean, surely.
I'm gonna have to ask you to moderate your language there.
Sorry, it's just... I'm maid of honor. I cannot miss this wedding.
And I am so sorry about that.
Can you call the supervisor?
I cannot do that.
Can you just call the supervisor?
I cannot do that.
Call the fucking supervisor.
Okay, that's profanity. We're zero tolerance on profanity.
I'm sorry, it's just...
Yeah, I have to serve the next customer.
No.
Step away, ma'am.
God, just fucking help me! I'm so sorry.
I've called security.
Oh, no, please don't do that. I'm a 5-starring you. 5 stars?
What's the issue here, Hannah?
Intimidation and profanity.
Oh, no, I was not intimidating.
Don't speak, ma'am.
I was just trying to...
Okay, so, in order to restore calm, I'm invoking my authority as airport security to dock you 1 full ranking point as a punitive measure. This is a temporary measure.
No!
The score reverts to normal in 24 hours.
No, but I need it now.
Period, all down votes are subject to a ×2 multiplier.
×2?
We recommend you avoid negative feedback at this time.
I'm on double damage?
Please, remove yourself from the airport immediately.
Okay, well, due to your rank...
If you haven't seen Black Mirror, come on.
Yeah,
buddy,
well, that's hilarious. I mean,
That is
slightly
amazing.
scary, but hilarious.
There's an element, there's an extrapolation of what we have today. There's an element of that already now with social standing. And,
Yeah. Or Ubers and
I guess what
ratings. And
that's true. And I guess what you're about to say, right, is that we've always had this. People have always had a social etiquette right back to Edwardian times, and you're rated based on how you're perceived. Just technology is taking it into a visible realm. All right, welcome to the future. That's what Black Mirror is. Yeah.
Scary stuff.
You've seen Black
Yeah.
Mirror. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So go and find that, everyone. Black Mirror. They do a bunch of episodes, but do not start with season 1, episode 1. It's to do with a pig. It's not a good episode. Hey, Australia is embracing it. So in Kmart, The Good Guys and Bunnings, they are using facial recognition as you walk in. But don't worry, there's a little placard notice at the front of every store saying your unique face print will be scanned. So apparently it's okay with the Privacy Act.
And what for? What are they doing it for? What's their rationale?
Exactly. Well, before I tell you that, I've worked in facial recognition companies. I know how this works. Your facial data print is not quite the same, but it's similar to your fingerprint.
Yeah.
So even though you may see an identical twin of yourself, you may say they're the same, but the algorithms will clearly see, no, I can see differences in your shape. All right, so it's like your fingerprint, and they've been collecting it of course, to keep us safe and so on. But they claim that they want to be able to pick up problematic people that come in the store and abuse their staff. Yeah. But the real problem is not that. The problem is, do we trust what they say? They're collecting all of this data. Where does it go? Does it get sold? We just found out that in Victoria, at least, Daniel Andrews' government was purchasing our movement data, so our commercial data of where we're spending money and so on. And he purchased that to frame his pandemic policy. So what are they doing with our data? What is Bunnings doing? Choice, the company. So they've come out and said this is bad, and it's potentially illegal under the Privacy Act. Anyway, Bunnings and people like that have responded, and this is the crazy thing. Bunnings have said, "We are disappointed by Choice's inaccurate characterization of Bunnings' use of facial recognition technology in selected stores. This technology is used solely to keep team and customers safe." So that's all you get. You get this catch-all excuse nowadays. We're going to keep you safe. Drop your pants. Why? We're going to keep you safe.
Well, I mean, you can't keep everyone safe, and safe is a relative term to. And we talk about this thing called psychological safety in the workplace, which sounds like a good thing, right? You want everyone to be happy, but we can't. So taking offence, for example, is subjective. What makes one person feel safe doesn't make another, and so we can't avoid suffering in life. So I think we're trying to. Potentially, if I'm getting this right, it's moving towards having no one's going to be offended at work, no angry customer's going to abuse someone else. My take on it is that we should teach everyone to be able to deal with whatever comes up, because we can't control everything. And then there'll be a flip side. There's a cost to this. There's a cost to this surveillance. Someone might, even if it's done with good intention, I don't know. Let's assume that. But then what if someone gets hold of it to use it for dodgy purposes, to control, to weed certain people out, to track certain people for other reasons, for to follow them, for certain to segment the population in different ways for different forms of control. I mean, you go down those sort of rabbit holes. But yeah, to my mind, it's a problem from that perspective if we're trying to make sure everyone is okay 100% of the time, because it's impossible.
Well, you have to assume that if they're trying to keep us safe and they're taking facial prints, then there must be an alert system. Like, where does that data go? It must alert back to the customer service desk at Bunnings or the manager's office to say a problematic person has entered the store.
Yeah.
I don't understand how that works. I mean, so the first time you're problematic, do they sort of go back, find you on camera and tag your face print with a flag to say you're a problem, and every Bunnings store now you'll be flagged? I don't know how this all works, and that's the point. We don't know how this works.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like they're trying to smooth out the highs and lows of life.
Yeah.
Full stop. And you have it in the health field. So you have people getting diagnosed now with pre-cancer. So you talked about people, legislation coming in trying to stop people who might commit a crime, potentially.
Yes.
Well, it's like even in the health field, you're pre-diabetic, is pre-cancerous cells. Well, what does that mean? Are you actually at risk? There was a study came out around melanoma now showing that about 30-odd% of melanomas will never amount to any problem. They're being cut out and removed. So I'm not saying, don't get your checkups or do whatever you want to do.
But that's pre.
But it's pre, and so again, we're trying to sort of almost sort of sanitize life.
But we accept that when it comes to melanomas, because we're like, I don't want to die of skin cancer, so cut it out, even though 30% will be fine. So we accept that. So we treat that differently from say facial recognition when we walk into Bunnings.
Yes, but there's a cost to everything, right? So if you get something removed, go through all the stress. Is it going to spread? You've got that thought in your mind of something that was cut out that they're now showing was harmless, would never have amounted to anything. The stress. Now I've got to be vigilant. I'm hyper-vigilant. I've added to and reduced my resilience, my mental resilience, but also I've impacted my immune system through that whole time. So there is a cost.
But we're willing to pay that cost for some things, and this
we're only willing because we didn't. We only now know, perhaps, so maybe we weren't willing. We were just told that all melanomas have to be removed.
Oh, I see. Like this. We haven't asked for Bunnings to do this. It's just foisted upon us.
Yeah.
My fear is that we'll accept these things and you get the creep, encroach.
Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I agree.
But I didn't know kindergarten. I don't know what you call it in Victoria. When you're 5 and you start going to school, that grade is new.
Prep.
Okay, sure, whatever. Crazy terms down here, crazy people. That is new. Kids used to start to be educated at 7 and 8. And then as society changed, we started to bring it forward, back, and you can argue whether that's good or bad or whatever, but seeing my kids at a similar age, I'm like, mate, they're doing a lot better at the moment, being more learning at home and in other ways. Anyway, now I'll look at this tweet. This is from Daniel Andrews. So Daniel Andrews is announced in Victoria, and this isn't about Victoria, this is going to be all across the world, honestly, at least Australia. They're announced that they're going to introduce a new grade before prep. Prep is when you're 5, right?
Yep.
So 4 years old, you're going to go to pre-something, right? And not only, the government's going to pay for it, but over 10 years, they're going to phase it in, and he's introducing pre-kinder. So when you're 2 and 3, they're doing a government-funded preschool thing. So anyway, my point is, this is not new. This has been happening for decades, where we're shifting the way we do things. And here's my point. It's impossible to go back. Can you imagine, at the time they brought in kindergarten in New South Wales, or prep here in Victoria when you're 5, when they brought that in, there would have been some people who said, no, like kids can't learn until they're 7. The same way I will be saying right now, no, don't send kids to school at 4, right? I'm that person now.
Yeah.
But now, that seems crazy. Imagine Stan Ekman saying kids shouldn't go to kindergarten at 5, at prep at 5. They should wait until they're 7. You're crazy. What are you talking about? Like, as long as I've known it, kids start at 5 years old. So it's impossible to roll that back. In the same way, this thing that we're bringing in Victoria is going to be impossible to roll back once it gets established. Because it's going to be, hang on, you're telling me that I can't put my kid in at 4? I've got to go to work. I've got to wait a whole nother year at home?
Well, I mean, I think it feels like, especially when we look in the context of history, it feels like things, might never be rolled back, or things will only creep and get worse. But I guess in the context of a lifetime, it might feel like that, or for 10 years, for a decade. But things can change, and something new can come in that might, be better than what, something else might supersede it that we're more happy with, or we lurch towards a crisis.
Yeah, but hang on, I'm not saying it's bad. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's great that kids can start school at 4.
So I was talking about the facial recognition technology.
Okay.
Sorry, not the school thing.
but that could be good as well. But my point is, these changes are often cemented and difficult or impossible to undo. So we have to be careful. I'm sounding like a conservative. You need to be careful as you make these kind of cemented changes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we should, have a lot of open discussion about it, as opposed to just an announcement in the news that they're doing it.
Absolutely.
I think that's really important.
Someone's calling me. Why are you calling me when I'm on the People's Project, people? How did you get my number? It's been leaked.
And just on the education thing, I think it's all about, again, information understanding.
Yes.
So a lot of the brain research shows that 0 to 7 are the most formative years. That's where you form your values, your truths.
Yes.
And so why, someone who completely has different ideological views, or even religion to you, they've probably learnt it at that age. So
I have a solution. We standardise it. We put all kids in at 3, and we have a curriculum.
Well, 1.
One. No, look, just when they're birthed, give them to the government, right? Yeah. We'll prevent any misinformation or disinformation, and we'll teach your kids from 0.
Yeah.
You can see them on the weekends. That is scary what's going on here, but this is I've got some more playbacks to show you. This is what happens in Australia, where we've started to roll out some of the things. Do you remember the COVID Safe app?
Yep.
Get the app, download the app.
Yep.
This is what they were saying about it.
Instead, QR codes, shopping reward cards and transport data proving key to tracking the movements of positive cases.
If you have an Opal card, please get registered. This is a very useful way of us tracing you.
We're asking all public transport users to register their MyCare cards.
The coalition maintains COVID Safe is working from a technical point of view, but can't say how many people still have the app downloaded on their phones. 7 million people have registered for the app since it was rolled out last April, in a flurry of hype and high praise from the Prime Minister.
This is the ticket to ensuring that we can have eased restrictions.
This is the ticket. This is the ticket. So I'm telling you, that's what's happening.
I'm not interested in the lotto prize, thanks. They can keep the ticket. Not much to win there.
If you play stupid games, you'll win stupid prizes.
Absolutely.
But the point of this segment is to say, look, this is not just a Chinese phenomenon. It seems to be happening everywhere. The tracking and control could very well be a good thing if you believe what they say. It could very well be, the end of the world if you believe those people. All I'm saying is it's happening, and it's happening without our consent. This is Kmart, Good Guys, Bunnings.
And on that, ultimately, people hold the ability to influence those sorts of decisions that get made.
How?
Well, it's a free market, right?
Lol. Yeah, go on.
No, but seriously, at the end of the day...
Corporate capture.
I'm not saying it's easy, but don't go to the good guys.
Oh, it's so easy to say these things.
Go elsewhere, right? Don't go to Target or Kmart. Don't go to Bunnings. Like Bunnings, Mitre 10. What else are there? Timber Hardware. Like there are other options out there.
Yeah, but sometimes they're closed. Sometimes they're 10 kilometres away, and Bunnings
Sure.
is next door.
No arguments, right? Not easy.
We spend a lot of Bunnings in here buying glue and stuff. You know.
Your face is definitely tracked there.
So
I've
many
got all your
times,
details.
multiple times in one day, because you always forget something.
But this is the whole thing. You have the ability to turn around in a free market and say, no, I do it all the time. I sit there and go, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you my business. And I might be the only one making that decision, but I still have the ability to control that. And I think people like realistically have to get an understanding of that ultimately you are in control. Much like we were talking about earlier where you said you can take, offence, that's up to you. And we actually discussed it in our last conversation where I said, I don't take offence from a lot of the things that people say about me, particularly if they don't know me, because I don't value your opinion. You're just some random individual who doesn't know me, has based that on absolutely nothing.
Like PR Guy 17.
I've had it even during the election. I had people call me a number of names based in absolutely nothing. And it's just like, yeah, okay, good luck to you, mate. I'm not fazed. I can take offence and allow myself to then be controlled and manipulated by my emotions, or much like in this instance where I have a need for a good or a service and I can allow them to operate on their terms, or I can say, no, I will take my business elsewhere. And that's part of the beautiful thing about the free market is that you can sit there and say no, and you can hurt their bottom line. If you hurt their bottom line, I guarantee you those policies, they go out the window in 2 seconds.
Which is why Hollywood and others have stopped being woke. Netflix has stopped being woke because they hurt the bottom line. Okay, look, I great. If we can use the free market, but I feel like we need to defend the free market. It feels like it's under attack as we all centralise into ever more government programs, government schooling, as we just talked about, government jobs, small businesses being crushed.
Absolutely, and they're big business. So take your dollars to a small business. Support local. Support your local.
What local hardware stores are there?
There's not many, but there are a couple.
Yeah, okay, all right. Anyway. Guys, let's move to News Without Notice, the last segment of the day where we discuss anything and everything that is on your mind. All right, News Without Notice, things that we couldn't fit into the program but we still want to talk about. I'll give you my News Without Notice, gentlemen. There is a case of a nan, a grandmother, you've taught me nan means grandmother. On the 24th of May at 3 p.m, this nan collapsed at Village Cinemas at Fountain Gate Shopping Centre, which is in Narre Warren, down in the southeast of Melbourne near Berwick. She collapses, okay? And this is her grandchild who's emailing me about it, and it's since appeared in the news as well. She collapses, calls 000, but she landed on her head and left side of her body. Called 000. Ambulance couldn't give an estimated time when it could be there because we live in Daniel Andrews, Victoria. People were going in and out of the movies in shock because they'd go into the movies, they come out of the movies, and she was still lying on the floor.
Oh, God, that's 2 hours.
What's that about? Okay, because they thought it could have been spinal injury. Almost 4 hours passed since the fall and the ambulance was still not there. And the reason why the nan could not be moved from the position is because the position she landed in from before was too painful and they had to determine about spinal injury. So 4 hours in one position is too long. Luckily, her son and daughter-in-law are a doctor and a nurse, so they came down and assessed her spine before they moved her. They were eventually able to get her into a wheelchair and transport her to the hospital themselves by 7:30 p.m. So it's almost 5 hours since she fell. 4 hours in one position. When they arrived at the hospital, they made her wait outside in tents because the hospital was overrun. This must be Monash Hospital, Casey Hospital, whatever it is down that way. They made her wait an additional 8 hours and could not give her a time when she'd be examined. They had no other choice but to drive her to another hospital because it was taking so long. Eventually, she was seen at 5:30 a.m. the next day at the different hospital. So now 14 hours post-injury. She sustained a fracture on the cheek, a laceration to the eye socket, severe bruising to the clavicle, shoulder, femur and fibula. She spent several days in hospital recovering from the fall and was dependent on a walking frame for a few weeks. Oh, wow. This is close to home. I've been to that shopping centre. This is not a political question anymore. I don't care who's in government. People are falling down, can't assess a spinal status for 4 hours and can't move. We have a problem. That is my news of the week. Thank you for sending in that story. hope your Nan recovers well and fast.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel for that. I feel for her, and as you say, hope she's doing better now. But obviously the physical industry is the trauma of having to lie there, not knowing what's going to happen. I mean, anyone who's probably been in that position can relate, I'm sure. I guess the boring point from me is that if I'm sort of putting that one aside, is the simple answer is, or the reductionist approach is to say let more ambulances, more people, more hospitals. My thought, if I'm having a holistic view at health more generally, so nothing to do specifically with this case, is that why are we so reliant on hospitals? If you think about the number of people in hospitals, I can't remember the percentage, is about 60 or so, 70% is chronic health issues.
Okay, that's scary. Not this then.
Not this.
That's an 80-year-old who
not
fell.
talking about her. No, absolutely. So I'm literally putting it aside, because if we then realise that
they're taking up the beds.
We're not using. Yeah, we don't all need to be in hospital.
The chronic people are taking up the beds, like the unvaccinated plague rats are taking up the beds.
Due to lifestyle choices, chronic health issues. So
lack of vaccination is a lifestyle choice.
Yes, but I don't think that's clogging up the system.
That's what we're being told. It's
Yeah,
a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Not verified with data though, just being told.
Yeah, but I'm talking about things like the biggest killers, heart disease, cancer.
Yes.
Most of those are caused by a series of lifestyle choices
Yep.
over many years. So if we didn't have that reliance, then we would have the resources.
Yes.
I'm talking strategically. I know this is an immediate issue. That hopefully something like that then would never happen, because we're able to respond to those physical accidents, trauma.
Yes.
Emergency wards are fabulous for dealing with things like that if they have the resources. But all our resources are going to treating conditions or papering or band-aiding over issues or symptoms of health issues that are brewing right now as we speak, and nothing's been done about it. The obesity epidemic, all that sort of stuff, and the reason why everyone, so many people were dying or sick or whatever with COVID is because people were unhealthy in the first place.
And now we're cancelled. Hey, so you're again taking a big picture view. You seem to do that a lot. You're a big picture kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. But it doesn't change the fact that we're always going to have, these situations, or we're going to have 50 years from now, we're going to have people who didn't take care of their health and they're dying of obesity. And we need to have trauma capability and capacity.
I agree. And so, but I guess it's sort of then what do you do? Do you just build in a lot of capacity now or extra capacity, but then the bigger the population grows, and if we continue to grow with our current lifestyle habits, that just gets bought. You might have more people, but more ambulance, more paramedics, but then you've got more people to try and deal with.
You know what you do? You drop the mandates. I have a paramedic we saw in this panel last week. There's a bunch of them who were fired, a lot of experience. Got a pandemic coming to interview with me next Thursday. Same deal. 10 years, whatever, as a paramedic, and is gone. And here's the thing, I've got a lot of paramedics and other health emergency first responders who have had 2 doses. We're not talking about people who never got on the train. People who have done their duty, according to the government, and they just don't want to have a third because they've either seen other people with a severe reaction to one of the first 2, or they've had a severe reaction.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence that I've seen that not having a vaccine or does anything to do with transmission, which is presumably what we're talking about. We don't, it's transmission, and I don't think it has any impact as far as I can tell.
But even without getting into the science of the vaccines, we are standing down the very resources that we need to be able to help our population.
Individuals that carried us through the pandemic pre-vaccine.
Heroes.
Correct, who went to zero.
Here it is.
Literally overnight. And that in itself, like both points that you make, I mean, first of all, we're going to talk about your libertarianism because it's underlying.
Look at this, diagnosing the science.
Second, that's a long-term game plan, getting to the root cause. In the short term, though, why are we still creating a segregated society when we've got people who have the experience, need work, were laid off because of a choice that they made, bodily autonomy. They made a decision based on whatever. It's their body, and all they're wanting to do is help others who have put themselves in whatever situation, whether they've made lifestyle choices or whether they've had an accident or whatever the case may be. Why are we preventing them from doing what they've always done and what they want to continue to do? To me, it's peak insanity.
I think in the UK, that hasn't happened. I think they backed off from doing that.
Because enough people stood up.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
Hey, enough paramedics stood up. It's the comfortable reality where we have to, uncomfortable reality where we have to think that the people responsible for this are not the people who did it to us, but it's us. Why didn't a number of our doctors stand up like they did in the US? Hey, the story of this Nan, sorry, I didn't mention, she actually caught COVID in hospital after that. So she's now really sick with blood clots in her lungs because of COVID.
Oh,
God. News without notice? Do you have anything?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to mention was this is a story I found in The Age, and it was, the headline, or the heading is "Mental Health Patients Handcuffed or Locked Away at Alarming Rates." And obviously, I work in the mental health and wellbeing space, so that grabbed my eye. And I think the thrust of the article was that despite the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system calling for a reduction of those practices of physically restraining people who are in mental distress, it's still going on.
At the highest rate in the nation in Victoria. Right?
Yes, yeah, correct.
In hospitals like Box Hill Hospital.
Yeah, and to my mind it was just something to mention because it was symptomatic again, and my way of thinking is pretty boring around this stuff in terms of the holistic view. People don't know what to do with people who are in high levels of distress. We talk about the chemical restraints, particularly in aged care, so we dose people down because we just don't know what to do. We don't know what to do with people who are suffering, and my argument is because they don't really understand why they're suffering in the first place, what leads them to get to this point. And so from a society perspective, these people become a problem, and so we have to control their behaviour just to make it easier for society, and that's unfortunately where it's led to, this lack of understanding of what's really going on. And this symptom first approach has led to a point where people feel, and I don't blame nurses, doctors maybe for doing it in some regard, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why they would feel like they have no choice.
Handcuff.
That makes sense.
At the highest rates in Australia.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got to say more broadly on that, I hail from Sydney. I've said this a million times, sorry if you've heard this story before, but in Melbourne, everything here has this tendency to it. I'm talking about the fire hydrants on the road, the bus stops, the lines in every government thing. There is a culture here, and it's clearly not centrally dictated. It's just that there's a mentality down here in this beautiful state of you need to herd people like sheep. I see it in the way you design your roads compared to New South Wales. I see it in the way you give out speeding tickets. I've had speeding tickets here and I've had speeding tickets there. There is such a punitive approach in Victoria that treats you like cattle. I mean, it's not like they treat you like cattle and they treat you like humans in New South Wales. It's just 20% worse in Victoria across the board. You're a little bit more like a cow.
Yes.
And in New South Wales, it's like, hey, we want to help you make a better decision on the road or in the queue or whatever it is. What is the deal with it? You're both Victorians? What is the deal with the culture down here being slightly more like treating people like cattle?
I mean, I have no idea. I mean, the only time I noticed, sort of perhaps the nanny state phenomenon, if maybe that's the way I describe it, was when I was living in the UK for 8 years. And so when I came back, I'm like, oh, whoa. Yeah, I really noticed it then. I didn't realise it was specific to Victoria. I don't have that comparison with New South Wales. But yeah, I think because life is generally pretty good, right?
In Victoria, it is. Yeah.
Life is good in Australia. It's a great country. We've got relative freedom, or we can talk about that. But so I think any restrictions that came in, we're just seen as, oh well, it's necessary. In life, whether it be extra harsh road rules, penalties, it's all for the good, the greater good of the. And so perhaps it's just been creep over time. I don't know. Okay.
Well, it's particularly rotten in Victoria. So there you go. All right. Thank you for coming in, gentlemen. It was a pleasure to have you here. Tom McDonald wasn't able to make it here today, which is okay because you're more famous than him anyway. Tom McDonald is going to be in a couple of weeks. There's a scheduling conflict. He's from the Melbourne Football Club, the Demons. Who else is on next week? Next week we have Topher Field and Ken Phillips from the Not Above the Law campaign. So I'm sure it's going to be quite political. And have a lovely week. I think we actually did some good work here today, gentlemen. Thank you. I think we had some good discussion. Hopefully people liked it.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
See you next time.